All right, welcome back to another live. I'm super excited to have everybody joining us today. On the show today, I have Alison Lewin. Yes, we have the same last name. Alison is my sister-in-law, but she is also an expert and has been working for a long time training people about how to perform better, how to look better on stage, how to look better and perform better in the way that they're speaking and the way they come across. And so I was like, man, my audience needs to know Alison. They need to know what she has to share to be able to present better on video. And now if you're saying, Joe, you could use a little bit of help yourself after that intro, you're probably right, which is why I'm having Alison on today. But Alison, before you jump in, a really big reason that I'm having you on is I'm in the B2B space. Like I'm working with companies that sell businesses that sell to other businesses. And the people who tend to be the most knowledgeable, and especially people who are consultants, they tend to focus a lot on their technical prowess and how smart they are. What I found over the years is that it's not the people who are best at what they do that get the best opportunities, but it's the people who are able to communicate most effectively and the people who are able to build an emotional connection and a relationship with other people by the way they communicate an idea. And so it's a really hard switch, I think, for people who are very technical to make, because they talk to other technical people and they think everybody wants to be at that level. But ultimately, if every time you're talking, people are bored out of their mind, you're not going to have the same level of influence with them. And so I think it's really important, if you have ideas that you want to put into the market and you want to have influence, you want to be able to sell what you're doing, or you want to be able to be seen as an industry influencer or an industry authority, you have to take time to focus on the way that you're coming across on video, the way that you come across when you get a speaking opportunity or a podcasting opportunity. And that's ultimately why I'm having you on today, Alison, to talk about that. So to kick off, can you just share a little bit about your background?
Yeah, absolutely. So, hello, and thanks for having me on today. Super excited to be here. So, my background is in choir, solo musical performance, and theater. So, I've been doing all of that, well, most of it, since middle school, all the way through college. And I also have 3 years of experience teaching theater on the high school level. So, that's what I did for 3 years. Is I taught kids how to present. And I've also done like one presentation class that they randomly gave me one semester. They're like, here you go. I'm like, oh, thanks, I guess. So that's a little bit of my background.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because I feel like when we're talking about the professional space, a lot of times people want to put on this professional air and they feel like they've got to be, super corporate. Exactly. You got to like come across in this very sophisticated, kind of dispassionate way. If you think of like high British society, it's almost like clicking into that mode. And the unfortunate thing about that is that the people I've found to be most successful are not like that at all. They tend to be people who are actually really passionate and they come across that way, and they make that connection. And so one thing that I found interesting also is that, well, I guess what I was going to say with that is, thinking back to drama class in high school, most people don't necessarily see those skills as being something that they could use. But I think if a lot of people took the time to kind of go back in their mind, close your eyes and remember back when you were in that drama class, what were those skills that you learned, and start bringing those to the forefront. And so the fact that you have that background, I think, is pretty fun. But anyway, to kick it off, one thing I found interesting is that even people that come across really passionate and authentic in person, sometimes they get on camera and they just like turn into yeah, exactly. They really struggle, get super nervous. And so why is it that you think people freeze up and get nervous on camera?
Yeah, so I actually used to teach. I did a mini lesson with my students whenever we were doing one of our units. I believe it was when they were going to do their monologue, their mock audition, I think is what it was. And we talked about stage fright, because a lot of my students, especially my tech kids, I taught technical theater. My tech kids are like, I didn't sign up to present. And I'm like, you still got to do it, sweetie. So I would go through it with them as well. But stage fright is actually a physiological response to danger or to fear, right? So you've heard of fight or flight, like or fight, flight or freeze, and some people freeze. So it's your body sensing that there's some sort of like danger, like oh no, something's gonna like hurt me, and so you like freeze up, and you're like, oh, where everything's gone, where to go? I had the notes in my head, it's gone now. And so there was actually a lot of famous people too who suffer from stage fright. I believe it was one of the Beatles. I want to say it was John Lennon. Used to get like physically sick before performances. And then he'd just go out and perform. So it's something that can be managed. You can learn to manage your stage fright, but I think people should know that just because you have stage fright or you freeze up, that doesn't mean that you can't be a fantastic performer. It's just the way that your body's responding to a fear.
Yeah, it's almost like they're in their brain. They're like, the village is going to cast me out on my head.
Right. They're like, "Oh, well, in this case, it's like, oh no, what if I screw up? People are going to go back and watch this. This could ruin me." You're right. This is something that could be really embarrassing. So it makes
Yeah,
sense why and then some people just don't know what to do with themselves. Like, what do I do with my hands? What do I do with my face? How do I respond
yeah,
to, oh no, it's even harder if you're by yourself. Like we're having a conversation. So it's a lot easier than if you're just like by yourself and you're like, there's no one in the room with me. Oh, what do I do?
yeah. It is really hard to do that, and especially if you're creating content for LinkedIn, it's a little easier because the bar for entry on LinkedIn video is pretty low. You don't have to be incredible at
Mhm,
video to get attention, but if you're going to create content for Instagram Reels or TikTok or YouTube, the bar is extremely high. You're talking about B2B content, like it's it's extremely difficult. And so you have to almost notch it up 10 levels. Um, and you have to be able to do that not when you're having a conversation with somebody else and you get that
mhm.
feedback. And I think that's one of the challenges that I've seen with those people who are really animated in real life and they get on video and they look like a stiff board. I think that that's a huge piece of it is that they're used to reading the body language of the person on the other end. And when there's no person on the other end, they just, they don't have anybody to read. And
Mhm.
so what are some ways then, if you're going to overcome uh, that freezing up or getting nervous on camera or struggling to have the passion that you actually have about what you're talking about come across, what are some practical things that somebody listening can do to present better on camera and get over that fear?
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, if you see me glancing down, I have notes in front of me, which is another little presentation tip. So you can just have an outline of what you want to talk about. And that's what I did earlier. And I jotted it out. I'm like, what was it? So some of the practical things that I teach my students to do is breathing. So if you actually want to try and calm yourself down, actually breathing in and out is helpful. And it sounds very simple, but breath has a huge impact on your body. Obviously, if you're not breathing, that's a problem. So you want to make sure you're getting air in and out of your lungs. Another thing you can do is tighten and release different parts of your body. So your toes, your feet, your hands, your legs. Usually, when we're nervous, we're holding tension somewhere.
Mm,
We're scrunching something up, and so doing that and like say holding or squeezing your left toes for like 5 seconds and then letting them go. And then doing it on your right toes and letting them go and just kind of working up your body and sort of helping release that tension. I find when I get nervous and I'll clasp my hands together and I'll also cross my legs. And that's actually
mm,
what that's doing is that's holding the tension in my body. So what I have to do in order to like physically and mentally relax is I actually have to separate my hands and my legs from each other, and I just kind of place my hands on my thighs, and I don't allow anything to cross or touch, because
mm.
then my body starts to relax a little bit. And that's extremely helpful, with sort of if you want to physically sort of calm yourself down. And I think once you get to know yourself better, maybe you already know yourself really well, you can kind of gauge what sort of things might help calm you down before you get on.
Yeah, I really appreciate that feedback because even we're I've got a bunch of young kids and you learn different things and they get into fight or flight super easily over all kinds of stuff. And it might even be something as simple as like, no, you can't have that sucker, and all of a sudden they're like going nuts, and the all the alarm bells are going off. And one of the best things for them, if you can get them to do it, and the hard part is getting them to do it. But if you can get your child to take a couple deep breaths, 3 deep breaths in and out, and you have different things like, okay, blow out the candle, sometimes it works on little kids, and until they figure out what you're doing. But it's those little activities that help them take those deep breaths, and it's extremely difficult to stay in that fight or flight mode if you take in those deep breaths. And then I think another piece of it is confidence, and how confident you feel really comes across. And so, I mean, I can even feel it right now, just naturally. I'm at my computer, so I start slouching over, and that comes across on camera, right? So that what you're talking about uncrossing your limbs and putting your hands on your hips, it spreads your body out and makes you feel more confident, and it makes you look a lot more confident too.
Yeah. Well, I always get nervous right before I do what I consider performance. So, like, whenever I'd go on stage, or like even right now, I'm actually nervous. But the way my body does nervous is that I get really thirsty. So I'm super thirsty right now. And then I get like really excited. And so I just try and channel that into whatever it is I'm doing. My mind also tends to go blank, which is why preparation is so important. That's another sort of thing you can do whenever stage fright, you suffer from some sort of stage fright, or it comes up, is prepare, and practice. The more you are prepared and the more you practice, the more easier it is going to be when that comes. It's going to be muscle memory. That was actually one of the things that really helped whenever we were doing productions, is we'd go through and we'd practice every line. There'd be a movement, walk over here. It's called blocking. It means just where you move on stage. And what would happen is, like, I'd go out, opening night, and I'd be like, what's my first line? Sort of the muscle memory would kick in, and I'd be like, oh, it's Neapolitan. That's a weird word, So, practicing and preparing is another way that you can sort of help with that, and also build confidence, because at that point you know enough of what you're talking about that you don't necessarily have to like try and wing it, or try to remember what you've done. You got it in there.
Yeah, that's a huge key with the practice piece of it, because if you're going in and you have no idea what you're talking about, and you haven't prepped and you haven't prepared. Actually, I'll say this kind of on the other side. If you are hosting somebody else and you're having them on your show, and you haven't let them know what you're going to talk about at all, there are some people who can really wing it. And those are going to be the experts, or the people who are used to talking. But if you have somebody come on that doesn't go on shows all the time, they don't have their like a true speaker, they're going to have their keynote speech, and they're going to kind of have their main talking points that they talk about all the time. And for them, your goal is almost to like, how do I get this person to talk about something that they don't normally talk about, so that you can make the conversation more interesting for people who have heard them before. But if you don't have that type of person doing the prep to send some questions ahead of time, so that the person actually knows what you're talking about, and you're not just making them stare into empty space, is definitely goes a long way too, and making somebody that you're having on camera be able to interact much more effectively. Because I've had it happen multiple times where I was invited on a show, and I'm like, I literally have no idea what you're going to ask me, and I'm not super good at telling stories on the fly. Like, it's not my forte. So having stories prepped, having ideas prepped, even like sorry, I'm kind of rambling here, but I'm just thinking out loud with, when you go on, if you start getting asked to speaking engagements or podcasts, or you're going to start leaning that way and you want to get more opportunities, having set stories that you tell about things, and having set kind of chunks of content, I think is really helpful. And that way, when you get asked about, how did you you get asked some broad question like, how did you end up as the director of growth at an agency? It's like, where do you want me to start? I'm going to tell my life story. Well, I was born in a car in the middle of a war. Like, are we going back that far? Like, it's this whole career arc journey.
Joe actually tells an interesting birth story, and he's just casually like, yeah, I was born in the car in the middle of a war in a different country.
Yeah. And if you got that, you got to flaunt it. But then if you don't have that practice, then you go into this whole long monologue and it's
Mhm.
20 minutes and it's like, really, I just wanted you to say, I learned these 3 things and it helped me. So if you can
Yeah.
have that origin story, if you get asked that question a lot, have that prepped ahead of time so that you can
Mhm.
tell it in a concise way and you can pull in those interesting elements and you've practiced it enough and you've thought through it enough to be able to kind of tell that story. Or if you have a topic that you get asked about a lot, have some different things prepped so that when you go on stage or when you have a Q&A and you get asked something, you don't, because I'm like more of a preparation person, and the more I'm doing it, the more that I can go on the fly. But that's only come because I've been asked certain questions enough to where then I can answer on the fly. But without that prep and practice, there's no way that
Yeah.
I could do that.
Yeah. I think that's good.
Cool. So you've brought up the word practice a bunch of
Mhm.
times. I wasn't counting, but it's probably 5 or 6 times that you said you need to practice. So that sounds great
Hey,
in
Joe.
theory.
Hey, Joe. You need to practice.
I'm taking the hint. We'll have to work together. So, but yeah, that word, it can be really, so far that's kind of broad, right? You need to
Yeah. Oh,
practice.
yeah.
Okay, great. What do I practice?
Great. I'm glad you asked that because you could spit theory at me all day and I'll happily write it down because I'm a type A note taker, but then I'll walk away and I'll be like, great, what do I do with this? So I actually do a lot more better a lot more better. Please excuse my grammar. I do a lot better when people give me practical steps on what to do. And so that's what I've prepared is some practical ways to practice things. So one of the things you want to think about when speaking, three main things, and this is what I would tell my students: voice, body, and face. What am I doing with my voice? What am I doing with my body? What am I doing with the face? Because that's where a lot of people connect and communicate is through those three channels, right? So one of the things vocal wise, and I love my husband, and he's talked to me about this, so I'm going to share it here. But he's kind of like, yeah, I'm kind of like just a flat voice, I'm kind of just monotone. And so one of the things with voice is varying it. So you have tone, which is how you sound, right? I could sound kind of annoyed at something and be like, "Oh my goodness, I hate this." But notice how there's still variation, there's still pitch in my voice. There's pacing, so that's how quickly or how slowly you talk. There's pitch, which is how high or how low your voice is. And then there's emotion, right? And all those things kind of culminate to create emotion.
Hmm.
um, so what you can practice with is basically just doing different things. Like maybe you try talking like this and you're talking about how much you love it when marshmallows just explode in the fire. You love it when they catch fire. Oh my goodness, it's great. Um, or maybe you just practice speaking at a lower tone and you just want to stay down here for a little bit. And then what you can do is you can take a sentence like, I love marshmallows. Say it different ways. Practice it with different emotions. Give me an emotion, Joe.
I like marshmallows.
I know it's hard to do. Oh, it is smiling. You'd be like,
uh,
I like marshmallows. Or I like marshmallows. Just practice it with different emotions. Think about how quick you don't always have to speak quickly. You don't always have to speak slow. You want to have a variation of it. It's okay to take pauses. It's also okay to speak a little quicker at times. So maybe you take that same sentence. I like marshmallows. I like marshmallows. And then maybe try combining something like, I like marshmallows. You know, with pitch, did I talk about pitch already?
well, hold on. So before you go any further, because I feel
Mhm.
like it's possible that we would lose people here because we're talking about marshmallows and they might be
We are
going,
talking about
well,
marshmallows, yes.
okay, I like marshmallow. I like marshmallows. Okay.
They're like, "What did I just walk
But
into? What is
this
this?"
is a conversation about how, essentially how professionals can come across more effectively on video. And so I want to tie those things together and say that, let's say that you're an engineer and you're talking about industry 4.0. Instead of saying, I like marshmallows, pick a topic about how, you know, the world of technology is changing, and you
Yeah.
could take something that that statement standalone, you could say it a lot of different ways and just take a term that you would normally use or a phrase that you would normally use and start working on that. And also, if you say it out loud and you try it a bunch of different ways, you might also realize that the word that you're using is really unnatural. So if you go, we have a turnkey enterprise solution that solves end-to-end problems for our multitude of clients. It's like nobody talks like that, but we write like that a lot. And then a lot of times in the professional world, we end up talking like we write. So like nobody would talk like that, but then you write it out and then you start saying the things that you would have never said. And it comes across really weird because they're words that nobody uses. And so if you start trying that vocal variation, like you're saying on, we have turnkey enterprise solutions, you're going to start going like, that sounds so canned and fake because nobody talks that way. So I think even practicing with these common phrases that you would use not only will help you make those phrases sound a lot more interesting by having vocal variation, but it also will help you use better words that you would actually use to talk to human beings and not try to impress the lexicon.
Right. And the thing is that if you really need to think about your audience too and who you're trying to engage. If you're trying to engage people with a higher level, like in your field, been in there for years, studied everything, know all the things, it might not necessarily be a bad thing to use some of those higher level phrases or sentences. But if you're doing to lay people, you want to put the cookies on the bottom shelf. You don't want to use words or terms that are going to fly right over their heads. That's more of a structural thing. Sorry, I taught English too. Than a presentation thing, but it is important too to know your audience and who you're trying to, and that too can kind of give you an idea of the level of energy you put out, because you don't want to be so over the top that it's like a little bit like it feels a little jilted and you're just like, I don't think I like this. You want to make sure you're putting out the level of energy that's appropriate for whoever your audience is.
Yeah, no, that is a great point. I'll push back on it a little tiny bit though, because
do it.
I feel like I agree with you in theory, but in practice, I've worked with a lot of people who are the smart folks that think that they need to use all those complex words, and sometimes they should. But I found that a lot of times their audience actually has no clue what they're talking about, and they're all too smart and too high level to admit that they don't understand what the other person's talking about. And then what ends up happening is you actually end up creating this whole lexicon of internal, I'm not sure if I'm using the right word there. You create this whole internal set of words and terms that nobody else uses on the planet except for your company, but you use them so often that you think that they're industry terms. And because you're not using simple words to describe something, you actually end up creating a language that only your internal team can understand. But nobody outside of your team has the guts to ask you about it because you're the
cookies
smartest
on the
person
bottom
in the room.
shelf then.
Yeah, put those cookies. I like marshmallows, so put those marshmallows on the bottom shelf. Let's go with that one.
Put the cookies on the bottom shelf. So sorry, just to review real quick. Tone, pacing, and pitch with your voice. So you can, it's almost, think of it almost like a song, like singing. Songs have rhythm, and that this analogy might not be the best analogy. I have a music background, so but everybody listens to music. So you've got fast songs, you've got slow songs, you've got songs that are sung higher, you've got songs that are sung lower, you have everywhere in between in the middle. So thinking of speaking as kind of like putting out a song or a rhythm, where you might talk faster, sometimes you might be slower, you might have something in the middle. Your voice, people will engage if your voice is changing. If you're just monotone and straight the whole time, you tend to lose people. If you're going to be like high pitched and like too energetic, you are also going to lose people because they're like, there's no way I'm going to listen to that for the next 45 minutes. Thank you. So you want to have variation in your voice while you talk. That really helps keep people engaged.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, because some people are just super high energy and you can only take that for so long, especially if they're talking about something really technical. But then more often than not, people who are really technical are freaking boring when they're talking, and it's very hard. Even if you understand what they're saying and you want to listen because they're super smart, it's hard when somebody talks in monotone and they don't change their vocal variation at all. And one thing I'm going to take away from today is to think more about how to say things with almost like a different emotion, like you were talking about it. Think like that. And even taking the time to pick one phrase in your conversation that you're going to have and one thing you really want to emphasize and think of how to say it in a way that's different. And
Mhm.
maybe that would be like having an alter ego. If you're talking, I'll just go back to the talking to engineers. If you talk to engineers all the time, you could say, if you've got John, the engineer, who's sitting over there, who's, working on I know that I'm using industry language, but they're putting CAD, they manage your CAD library over there. And then they get grumpy anytime you fix, and they're like, Joe, leave me alone. I don't want to talk about that anymore. Even just doing something to make it a little more interesting and playful.
Mhm.
I think that disrupts the way that people are assuming you're going to talk, and kind of wakes people up, makes people pull in a little bit more. So we did get a question here that I'm going
Yeah.
to pull on screen, and we can talk about it. Cora, if you're still on, give us a shout out so we know that you're here. If not, then make sure to send it to you
Hi,
after.
Cora.
But you talked about, you asked, what about being overly conscious of the way you're coming across? What about being overly conscious of the way you're coming across, ending up not sounding genuine or natural, especially when you're speaking without a script? Do you have any tips for that?
That is a fantastic question, because that is definitely a concern of like, oh no, I'm overdoing it. People are going to know that I'm fake. I think some of this once again goes back to practicing it. So it could be in front of a mirror. It can be with friends. If you're just doing a self-recording, you can choose an object or something that you're going to have the conversation with. Like this, I'm the wrong way. This plant behind me. Say that's like right across from me. I can practice having a conversation with that plant. I hate doing this. I don't do it. I should. I hate it. You can record yourself doing it, and just kind of do a video and then watch and play back and just kind of see, hey, what are some habits or things I might be doing that's not necessarily like the best, or what sort of things can I tweak. In the end, sounding genuine or natural, you just want to think about conversation. Like Joe and I are able to, it's hard when you're doing it by yourself. That's why you want to converse with Carl the plant back there. I'm going the wrong way. But if you can get to the point where you sound conversational, even if you're by yourself, that's going to be extremely helpful. I'm trying to think if there's anything else.
Well, let me
with
throw
that.
something in there. And you said that recording yourself is really difficult. And it is. So that's where I would say, if you find that you're overly scripted, get a tool. You can download a free version called Descript, where you can record yourself and then you can edit based on the transcript and work on whatever it is that you're going to talk about, and just say it over and over and over and over again, and go back and watch it and then edit it and then re-record it again, and just keep doing that over and over again. Like I've edited, I am by no means an amazing person on video. I'm working on it, but by nature, I'm horrible on video. I'm extremely monotone.
I think you're
by
doing
nature.
well.
Yeah, thank you. But I put in a lot of practice too. So, normally I'm very monotone. I tend to ramble a lot, and I throw in tons of filler words. And I've improved, I would say, primarily because I've recorded a ton of video of different things over the years. And then I've had to edit that video myself, just in the role that I was in. So then I have to go back and go, wow, that sucks. What could I do to make that more, like, I'm bored to tears watching myself.
I think
what can I do to make it better?
Something that's helpful is people can talk very easily about things that they love or things that they like. So if you're worried about coming across as being like too much, or you don't feel like you're sounding like genuine or natural, practice with talking about things that you love to talk about, things that you normally talk about, because that's really like when we can really relax and just sort of speak naturally whenever we're speaking about things that we already know about or we already love. And from there, you can take that and apply those principles to whatever it is you're going to talk about. Because at the end of the day, you want to love what you're talking about. Even if you don't, you do. Because if you love it and if you're genuinely interested in what you are speaking about, so is your audience. And it's going to be a little easier to come across naturally if you enjoy whatever it is you're speaking of. Because at the like me as someone who has like a teacher's soul, I want to impart knowledge to people. And so that's what really helps me is whenever I'm teaching, I'm imparting information or things that I hope will help people. And I'm able to sort of relax and just step naturally into
Mm.
that role, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and the last thought that I'll say, because we're getting to time here, and I know people
Oh,
will have to roll, but the practice piece really comes into play there. I know we've kind of said it a couple
mhm,
times, but when you practice something and then you go, man, that just didn't sound right, and you just do that over and over and over again, it's almost like if who you are is authentically boring, then you have to change who you are
on camera.
authentically in real life too. Like if you like, in other words, if you talk in monotone all the time, nobody's going to pay attention to what you have to say on camera or off. And so then if you practice these things for being on camera, the more you practice it on camera, the more you're going to recognize when you're talking in monotone in a normal conversation. And then when you catch yourself doing that, you'll improve it in your normal conversation and it will become
Mhm.
authentically part of who you are now. And it's a better version of yourself because people pay
Yeah.
attention to you more, you get more opportunities, people like you and they want to make intros for you. All of those things happen when you learn how to communicate and you have vocal variety in the way that you talk normally. And so then it's
Mhm.
authentic when you do it in real life and you do it on camera. And the only way to make those two things meet is to recognize that you need to practice and intentionally practice those
Practice,
things.
yeah. And I know we're running a little short on time here, so there were 2 more things I wanted to talk about, real quick, is your body and your face are other things you need to consider. So what are you gonna do with your body, and what are you gonna do with your face? Bodies can be weird because people are like, "What do I do with my hands? I don't know what," and for
I'm
me,
supposed to fold
I'm a
them and put them.
natural gesturer. I just like to gesture when I talk. And some people might be like, "I don't do that naturally, I'm stiff." My encouragement there would be just to practice once again with natural gestures. If you don't gesture when you talk, maybe come up with a couple gestures that you can do. You don't have to be like all over the place flinging your arms about, but if there's something that comes up, hand, two hands, like I don't know, like
Mm,
basic like body language that we use is perfectly fine. You don't have to be crazy with gestures, but it's good to include a couple of them because if people see that you're animated, not like oh animated, but just like enough, then they're going to be a little more engaged too. And then finally, what are you doing with your face? So this is our main communicator right here, capable of doing all sorts of fun things. Yay! Um, you want to think, you don't, once again, you don't have to script your emotions. You don't have to be like, here, I'm going to be angry. But you want to sort of emote along with what you're saying. And if you're someone who isn't naturally emotive, that's okay. Um, what you can do is you can just kind of practice maybe one or two facial gestures that you feel work for you. And once again, they go along with your hand gestures. It all kind of melds together after a while. But people tend to engage too with some expression, or even if it's just
mm.
smiling, like, "Hi guys, so happy to be here. Okay, let's get started." Does that make sense?
Oh, totally. Yeah, and it's actually interesting because I was working on a live with a client earlier today, and our guest is a professional. She's in cybersecurity, but she's very emotive in the way that she communicates, and so and she gets she's in sales and she's kills it at sales because people want to be around her because she's engaging. And so,
Hmm.
I think again, it's like if you're not naturally that way, but you want to have influence, you want to have impact, then then figure out how to practice those things until they
Yeah.
become natural. Because what you're describing there is something I really need to work on because I'm not, I basically have like two faces. I have like this face and then this face. And those are basically
That
like
is
the two
that is the
faces that I
standard
make all
Lewin
the time.
expression is eyebrow raise. If you ever see Joe raise his eyebrows, it means he's being passionate about something.
Yeah,
I
there you
know
go.
because my
Exactly.
husband does the exact same thing. It's like,
Exactly.
"Wow." You're like,
And so that,
"I'm so
that's an
excited
area.
right now."
Yeah, and our vocal variance doesn't change, but the eyebrows go up. So
The
that's
eyebrows go
the
up.
only way to know that we're excited about something. Uh,
One more thing that I would suggest doing is look or listen, because I know a lot of people like to do podcasts or YouTube. Look and listen to people who naturally engage you. people that you find interesting or that kind of pull you in. And don't copy them, but take notes of some of the things that they do and see if that's not something you can incorporate somehow or practice with you. Because if, once again, we're not trying to make you into somebody else, we're trying to make you into you, just a more camera expressive version of yourself, if that's not normally your mode. So it's always good to kind of like take something to observe, take, and incorporate rather than just try and mimic.
Yeah, I love that. I love that advice. And again, it's the point of this conversation to wrap it up is really, if you're listening to this and you're thinking about going on video, see the eyebrow, you're considering going on video, then you probably want to have some kind of influence, whether that's within your internal company you're working at, or you want to produce thought leadership content. You want other people to hear your ideas. You want to be able to share those and communicate those effectively. And maybe it's not even on video. Maybe it's a presentation that you're giving in person. And even if it's presenting numbers to the board or numbers to your leadership team, the more engaging that you can be in those conversations and the more that you can incorporate these things, you're going to have more influence and you're going to get more of what you want out of life if you engage other people. If other people feel, if other people have an emotional response when you're talking, you're going to have a much more positive impact and be able to get more of the things that accomplish more of what you want to accomplish and see more of the things that you want to see. So yeah, definitely go back and re-listen to this, take some notes, because Alison, you shared some awesome nuggets today about some of the different super practical things people can do to be more effective on video. I definitely know I'll be working on having a few more facial expressions and adding some more emotion into the way that I talk and practicing that. So thank you so much for joining me today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.